the MECS website so that other people that may not be able to attend today can access it and see some of the questions that come out. Yeah, it's good to see quite a few of you from different organisations here, so really happy you could attend. And so what the idea of this this webinar really is, well, it's to introduce the Cooking Diaries approach, or the Cooking Diaries methodology, which we see as a means or a methodology that could be used within the Eco Challenge Fund to deliver the data that we need for the eco projects. But maybe just to backtrack, because I'm aware that maybe not everybody here is part of an eco project. So ECO is the Electric Cooking Outreach project, and it forms part of the MECS program, the 40 million UK Day program to fast track clean cooking solutions and move away from biomass. Specifically, the Eco Challenge Fund, and I'm the research coordinator for that project, has two streams. One stream looks at pilot projects, so seeing whether electric appliances fit the cultural cooking practices and electricity supply in given markets. These are extended pilots with a 6-month data collection period. And the other stream is market assessment, so looking at the opportunities for electric cooking within a specific market. And so we feel the two together, there's definitely synergies there that can help create an evidence base for policymakers and hopefully de-risk decision making and policy making for government officials, etc.
But this is such a hot place, you will not.
Okay. So the format for the webinar today will be pretty straightforward. So after the introduction, we'll then be hearing a talk from Simon Batchelor, who is the Research and Innovation Director for the MECS programme. Unfortunately, Simon wasn't able to attend live today, so he has recorded the talk for us, and that talk will be giving us an introduction to the Cooking Diaries approach. During the talk, if you have any questions, please put them into the chat box, and then at the end of the talk, or during the talk if I can, I will try and address as many of them as possible. Just a couple of quick, if you like, webinar rules. During the presentation or during Simon's talk, if you could keep your microphones off, if you could keep them muted, and also I suggest if we could have the videos off as well, just in case there's issues with bandwidth and so that it doesn't slow down. As I was saying, any questions you have, can you add them to the chat box? And then just to reiterate, yeah, I will be recording this this webinar. Okay. All right. Thanks very much for that, and I'll now begin the talk, Simon's talk.
Welcome to the Electric Cooking Outreach Challenge Fund winners. This short webinar series is to share some research methods and tools that you might want to use, hosted of course by Modern Energy Cooking Services. This is webinar 1, a basic introduction to Cooking Diaries, and my name is Simon Batchelor. The aim of this webinar series is to assist you by highlighting that Cooking Diaries protocol. It's a method that we've been using for the last few years and therefore has some tried and testing behind it, and it can deliver the data that is required from the Eco project. The webinar series itself will consist of about 5 webinars. This is the first introduction. Then we'll show you how to set up a cooking diary, what the data collection looks like, and concluding the study, making sure that you've got the right sort of data and the data analysis and exiting from the participants. The last webinar, a little bit different, about how to market efficient electric cooking appliances. You can find useful resources for carrying out cooking diary studies on the MECS website and the shared Eco Awardee resource folder that you have at your disposal. The Cooking Diaries protocol contains the most complete guide to the Cooking Diaries approach, but variations of this methodology adapted to local cooking contexts can also be found on the website and in the shared folder. So the benefits of the Cooking Diary protocol is that it captures the learning that we've gained over the last few years, and by keeping some sort of consistency, we should be able to replicate a form of data collection, processing and analysis which is comparable across contexts, and therefore allows us to build a broader evidence base on how people cook. There have been previous cook stove tests. We have 40 years of work on improved cook stoves, and that's resulted in things like the water boiling test, controlled cooking test, and the kitchen performance test. Each of these tests were trying to identify whether improved cook stoves were actually heating the food more quickly and with less less fuel. They didn't really focus on how people cook, how a cook cooks, and whether when households adopted or transitioned to a different fuel or appliance, whether their cooking practices changed. Now, the thing about electricity and, of course, LPG is it gives much more controllability than a charcoal stove. You can change the airflow in a charcoal stove and turn it up and down. But with electricity and LPG, you can literally turn it off. You can turn it right down to simmer. And indeed, with electric energy efficient appliances like the electric pressure cooker, you can walk away and do something else because it is the electric that switches itself on and off. So previous studies of how people cook has tended to just be based on a few observational qualitative data points. And this protocol tries to match the qualitative stuff with the quantitative, a recording of how people cook linked to quantitative measurements of their energy consumption. As I've said, it's a mix of quantitative and qualitative approaches, and it's targeted at addressing the main research questions for your Challenge Fund projects, which are, does the use of an efficient electrical cooking appliance fit the cultural processes of cooking for a given market? So do people change their menu, change their eating habits if they move from biomass to electricity? Are they making adaptations in order to accommodate the appliances, or have they been able to cook exactly the same typical weekly menu? We always say within the program, you don't want to mess with people's cooking. Cooking is really important. So the Cooking Diaries protocol is best conceived of as 3 phases. There's the pre-cooking phase, setting it up, the actual cooking diaries and energy measurements, and the post-cooking exiting from the participant, their views, and making sure that your data is okay. So, sorry, let's start at the beginning. You'll need to recruit and train enumerators. The household will need some hand-holding. The frequency of that hand-holding will be discussed in another webinar. You then need to select your participants. Now, this is a bit of an iterative process. Obviously, participants need some access to electricity. And indeed, we've put down here wiring and electricity supply issues. It's worth investigating the house some people have wired their houses with less than optimum quality wiring, and it may be that drawing a high power load on a cooking appliance may actually trigger fuses or burn out wiring. So it's important to have some sort of electrician who will check the quality of the electricity, the wiring issues. And then, of course, you yourselves will know that some electricity grids have load shedding, and you need to work out whether that is within acceptable parameters. We've put down selection of appliances. You will have your own ideas on which energy efficient appliances you want to go for. Many of the Eco Challenge Fund winners are aware of the Global Leap, which is identifying electric pressure cookers of a certain quality. And you may want to access those from the global market, or you may have some options in your local market that you want to pick up on. What we do then suggest is some participatory cooking sessions with the participants, because it is important to know that those participants are going to be comfortable with the appliances, and indeed they may prefer one appliance over another. Registration survey, of course, once you have decided who the participants actually are going to be, you need to capture their demographic details, how many people in the household, who primarily does the cooking, etc. And then it's actually worth doing a little bit of training with the participant on the use of the device. So something like an electric pressure cooker uses a lot less water than most people are aware of. And used to, and so if you just give them a few hints, that can solve a lot of problems later on. Now, we've put cooking diary on existing fuel. It's really difficult to know whether that's a pre-cooking diary phase or post part of the cooking diaries. We need a baseline. We need to know what their menu was. So what foods did they normally cook, and what appliances did they normally use? What size pots? Did they use LPG or charcoal? And the cooking processes and the times. Did they fry the onions first? Did they, follow it up with the stew afterwards? Now, how long that takes is a little bit debatable. It's whether it's a week or 2 weeks, but nevertheless, trying to capture their use of their existing fuel, but also how they cook, and in particular, the menu, the sequence of foods that they tend to go through. We then enter the cooking diaries itself. And so having got the appliances and started using the appliances and being asked to use the appliances as much as possible, they then need to measure the the electricity monitored for its energy consumption. And again, repeating the whole idea of the data on the foods cooked and the cooking processes and the times. You may say that this is fairly intensive in terms of data collection, and you'd be right, it is. But the reason we're doing it is because just getting the energy data, the electricity monitoring, doesn't really tell you whether the behavioral features are kicking in. So for instance, if they were used to cooking really tough meat and bean stew that took sort of 3 to 4 hours of boiling, and then they found, they didn't want to do that with an electrical appliance, so they switched to rice, which is easy to cook. It would be totally unfair to then have a load profile that said, this used to be their consumption in charcoal or LPG, and this is now their consumption in electricity. We need to know that the menu has changed to accommodate the new appliances. Once you've done that for a period of time, You then might withdraw from the participants in the intensive monitoring. You could carry on monitoring the energy use for a little bit longer once you have been able to discern energy use connected to menu. And if you exit a participant, you want an exit survey, you want to sit with them. What did they like? What did they not like? Get their feedback on the good and the bad points. And throughout this process, you are collecting a lot of data, and be good to have a process of data verification. And that's where the enumerators come in, making sure that people are recording things properly. And it's clean, the data is clean. It's very tempting to use pieces of paper. We are suggesting that we have already set it up on a tablet system, and you can access that tablet system. You may have your preferred tablet system, that's fine with us, but then you'll have to build the whole questionnaire yourself, or export it from our system and import it into something like CTO Collect. But the important thing is, if you go for paper, then please be aware that that is an extremely tedious process of digitizing that data. It can take a lot more effort than you think, and people get very bored transferring numbers and ideas from paper into an Excel spreadsheet or into any other form of digitization. The possibility then for having data that doesn't make sense is quite strong. Other people will explain to you the software that we've developed so far. So, could you use a different approach? Yeah, we are flexible, and we understand that different locations and different situations may require different methods to be adapted. This is fine, but if you intend to use a different approach or a modified version of the cooking diaries, we ask that you make contact with us and tell us, highlight the approach that you want to take, the reasons you prefer this approach to the cooking diaries per se, and most importantly, explain why your approach will still deliver the data required by the eco-research questions. You want to keep an eye on those research questions. And it's not just about the use of the energy efficient appliance and the amount of energy it's using. It's about culture and behavior. And we would like some insights into that.
Okay, so yeah, that was the end of the first talk by Simon. Just giving an overview of the Cooking Diaries methodology and approach. In the subsequent webinars, we're going to be looking at how to set up the Cooking Diaries approach, the data collection process, and also data verification and data analysis. So we'll be looking at the different steps of the Cooking Diaries approach in each webinar. Maybe one other thing I should emphasize about the whole Cooking Diaries approach and really the eco project is that we're not trying to change people's cooking culture. We're trying to see whether the electric appliances fit people's cooking processes and cultural cooking processes and the energy supply there. I noticed that there weren't any questions in the chat box regarding the talk, but I don't know if anybody would like to ask any questions in person. If you do, if you could use the raise hand button, and then we can maybe have time for a few questions over the spoken questions. No. Okay, well, I mean, if nobody has any questions, or if any questions come to mind a little bit later and you want to ask them, two things you could do: either add them to this current chat box, so there's a record for everybody, and then that's probably the best way, and then we can all see those questions, and then it becomes like an online record, or you could email me. We do have a question here from Rabin. Is the cooking diary available in Kobo Toolbox or any other online platform? So yes, in the next webinar we have used Kobo Toolbox, and that's the one that we recommend, mainly because it's free. It's set up for this kind of development work, and so our previous cooking studies work that we've done has used Kobo Toolbox, and we have example questionnaires, etc., that we've used for that platform. If you have a similar platform, then that should also work fine. But yeah, I think the main thing is just to remember that really using a digital platform like Kobo Toolbox, it is going to save you a lot of time, a lot of effort, and also improve the accuracy of the data. It avoids the mistakes that can happen when you're transferring from paper to digital format. Yeah, so I hope that addresses that question. Okay, any others? All right then. Well, I think we'll leave it there then. But please, yeah, do add any further questions to this chat box if they come up. And just to let you know that the next webinar will be the same time next Wednesday. We'll be looking at setting up a cooking diary study. So talking through some of the processes like training enumerators, using digital platforms like Kobo Toolbox, and also the training of the participants in the study. So yeah, just like to say thank you very much for joining, and I hope to see as many of you as possible next week. Okay, thanks very much.
Thank you.